Well, hello everyone, and welcome to 4 of Skeptic. We are going to be answering one of the toughest questions when it comes to the Christian faith, and it's simply this. Hey, what about all the other religions that are out there? Like, what makes you think that Christianity is the one right religion? And so I just wanted to first off introduce myself and thank you for coming. So my name is Simon. I am your Skeptic host for this course, and I'm just so pumped that you are journeying with us. So if you made it this far, it's week 4, and yeah, we're excited to be on this journey with you as we try to present and find and discover evidences on why we think it's rational to believe in God. And so if you're joining us as a skeptic, a seeker, a saint, we're just pumped that you're here. So thank you for joining us. If you haven't done this yet, download this skeptic booklet. Okay, so if you go to broadwaychurch.com/skeptic, you can download your skeptic booklet, and then every time that Darin says, as your outline says, or you can fill in the blank, you can actually fill in the blanks along with us, okay? So you can feel like you're at home, like you're a part of this course. So the teaching that we're going to see tonight was first presented, we filmed this last year, pre-COVID, in January of 2020. And so just so you know the context of what you're watching, it was filmed in Vancouver at Broadway Church. And yeah, we're excited. Now, you might have noticed so far that Darin hasn't come on the screen yet. And unfortunately, Darin couldn't be with us live for week 4 of Skeptic tonight. And so he won't be joining us tonight. But we have something special at the very end of the presentation. So normally what happens, even starting right now, you'll see that there's a number on the screen. You can start to send in your questions via text. And I'll get those at 604-243-4102. And so any question that arises throughout tonight's presentation, as Darin answers the question, what about other religions? You can send us these text questions in, and then normally at the end, I would ask Darin live your questions. And just straight off the phone, I'll fire him at him, and he'll answer those questions. But again, tonight he can't be with us. So we have pre-filmed what we're calling like the hottest and greatest questions about this topic at the end of his presentation. So normally when Darin does this presentation live, we have a microphone where people will come up to the microphone and push back or ask questions or say, hey, can you explain this? Or what about that? Or that didn't make any sense. And yeah, but what about this? And there's this a live kind of debate format, Q&A time. And so we gleaned the best and toughest and most intriguing questions from those times. So these are live questions that we got from people live off the floor that I sat down in an interview with Darin, and I was able to fire off these questions to him, just some of the top ones. And so we're going to transition to that, a live interview with Darin, some of his question and answers about this topic at the end of this presentation. Whew, okay, we've covered a lot of ground so far. I'm excited for tonight. I'm glad you're with us. Let's jump right into tonight's topic. Hey, Darin, what about other religions? Let's roll the tape.
A man hated his wife's cat. I mean, this cat had serious attitude. And so the guy decided that he was going to get rid of the cat. So he secretly drove about 20 blocks from home, opened the car door, dropped the cat by the side of the road, and drove away. But by the time that he got home, the cat was already walking up the driveway. I mean, he couldn't believe it. So the next day, he decided that he was secretly going to try to do this again. But this time, he dropped the cat off 40 blocks from home, got back in the car, but the same thing happened. The cat managed to find its way home again. So the third day, he determined he was going to make things as complicated as possible. So without his wife knowing a thing, he blindfolded the cat, put it in the trunk of his car, then drove around for 2 hours, turning left, turning right, driving in circles, driving all over the place until he ended up several miles from home. He then opened the car door, took the blindfold off the cat, dropped it by the side of the road, and he drove away. Except he made it so complicated that he got lost. And after a couple hours of not being able to figure out where he was, he called his wife. And he said, "Honey, is the cat there?" And she said, "Yes. Why do you ask?" He says, "Can you put him on the phone? I'm lost. I need directions." Well, we're continuing in our Skeptic course, a course that's designed to give some directions in life. And we're asking and answering some foundational questions about life, about God, and Christianity. Now, we began this series with the question, what is the evidence for the existence of God? And we proposed that evening that God is the best explanation for the existence of a contingent universe, meaning a universe that doesn't have to exist, a universe that had a beginning. We learned that God is the best explanation for the fine-tuning of the universe. We learned that God is the best explanation for the existence of objective moral values and duties, and God is the best explanation for the evidence surrounding the facts surrounding the life and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. Week 2, we asked the question, so what's the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus? And we looked at 4 historical facts that need to be explained. The fact that Jesus died and was buried. The fact that Jesus' tomb was found empty by his women followers 3 days later. The fact that followers and even enemies of Jesus testified to seeing him and interacting with him alive after his death. And the fact that his followers proclaimed his resurrection without any previous anticipation of this event. And we learned that 2,000 years worth of skepticism has not produced any alternative scenario, hypothesis to explain all 4 of those accepted historical facts. Week 3, last time we were together, we asked the question, so what about suffering and evil? If there's this powerful God who can raise the dead, why do people suffer? Why is there evil? And we learned last week that there's moral evil and natural evil. Moral evil, we learned that we live as human beings with the ability to make free choices. Love requires the ability to choose. And we learned that choosing to reject God and God's design creates evil. Well, what about natural evil, hurricanes and so on? We learned that we live in a world of dependable laws, which creates the dynamic of cause and effect. A background against which we can make our choices. And sometimes those laws can work against us. Remember, we learned gravity can be both positive and negative at the same time. Positive for us who are sitting in chairs so we don't hit the ceiling. Negative for a guy who's falling out of an airplane without a parachute. At the same moment, the same gravity is both positive and negative at the same time. Now, whether it be moral or natural evil, God's omniscience and sovereign power is able to use all of these choices and events for his ultimate good. We trust him. We learned that last week. Now, tonight, we're going to address the question, okay then, so what about other religions? Darin, are you claiming that Christianity is right and all other religions are wrong? Is that what you're saying? How dare you make that statement, that declaration? I mean, isn't that incredibly intolerant? Isn't that incredibly arrogant? How dare you make such a claim? I was on a flight recently and I found myself sitting beside a young woman. She was from New York City. We were flying transatlantic back to North America. After completely ignoring each other for the first 6 hours of the long flight, I was so glad she was like me. She just didn't want to talk. I'm an introvert, actually. I'm fine in front of a big crowd, and I'm fine one-on-one, but I just don't like meeting new people. I shouldn't say that. It's terrible on film. I love meeting new people. I don't mean that way. That sounds terrible. I just mean all you introverts understand, right? So I was on this plane and I was thinking, I hope she'll just leave me alone and we won't have to talk. And for the first 6 hours, she must have been feeling the same way because neither of us talked to each other. Until after 6 hours, we finally got into a conversation. It became too awkward. And she asked me the inevitable question after some small talk. So, what do you do for a living? I usually try to avoid this question since people tend to treat me differently when they find out that I'm a pastor. Nonetheless, I told her eventually that I was the pastor of a church in Vancouver. And she then asked me what we believed at our church. And I said, well, we believe that every person was created to experience and express the purest love imaginable. She said, created by whom? I said, created by God. She said, which God? And I said, well, the God who created the universe and raised Jesus Christ from the dead. She said then, I'm an atheist. I believe there is no God. And I certainly don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead. And then she said this, and this was the key phrase. And there's a bit of a ring, by the way, on my voice here. And then she said this key phrase. She says, it looks like you and I are on completely opposite side of things. But isn't it nice that you have your truth and I have my truth and we can both live our truths? Did you hear what she said? Did that make sense to you? Or did something sound not quite right to you? She didn't say, you have your beliefs and I have my beliefs and we can both live our beliefs. If she'd said that, I could agree with that, but that's not what she said. She said, you have your truth and I have my truth and we can both live our truths. She said, our truths are opposite, yet both our truths are true because we sincerely believe them because they're our truths. Really? Is that how truth works? Think about this. I say that I believe 2 + 2 = 5. Okay? That's my belief. I sincerely believe that. And you say, well, I believe 2 + 2 = 4. Okay? We both have our beliefs. But are both of our beliefs true? I don't think so. And if you think so, don't go into accounting. Okay? If I believe that 2 + 2 = 5, I'm believing something that's not true. Okay? 2 + 2 does not equal 5. 2 + 2 = 4. I can believe it equals 5. I have every right to believe that it equals 5. I can sincerely believe that 2 + 2 = 5 with all of my heart. I can sincerely live according to my sincerely held belief that 2 + 2 = 5. But I still would not be living according to the truth because the truth is 2 + 2 = 4. Imagine I'm behind the counter at Starbucks and I give you your change back. And imagine I say to you, okay, you gave me $10, that I got to give you $5 back. So here's 2 and here's another 2. There you go. Have a nice day. Would you say, well, that's true for him. Therefore, I believe it's true. Or would you correct me and say, actually, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5. 2 + 2 = 4. You still owe me $1. Would you point out my error? And would you correct me? Chances are you would. Now, we're Canadians, so some of us wouldn't correct. And we, for the sake of $1, so let's raise the stakes. What if I was your employer and I said, okay, we hit a record profits last year and you hit all of your sales targets. Well done. So here is the $100,000 bonus that we promised you in your contract. $2,000 plus another $2,000 equals $100,000. There you go. Have a nice day. Would you correct me now? I'm certain you would. Why? Why would you correct me? Why would you point out my error? Because while there may be times when we can politely look the other way, when the stakes are high, truth matters. Can you think of anything else in life where the stakes are higher than your eternal existence? Can you think of anything else in life where the stakes are higher than your potential existence beyond the grave? Why is it that we ignore the demands of truth when it comes to the beliefs and claims of the world's religions? What is it about religious beliefs and claims that somehow place them outside of the realm of investigation and critique? What is it about the religious beliefs and claims that somehow place them outside the realm of objective truth? What is it about religious beliefs and claims that somehow enables two people holding two completely opposite views to both be right? It's irrational. If you say there is no God, and I say there's only one God, and she says there are many gods, how can we all be right? Someone has to be wrong. Someone's view has to be false. No matter how many believe it, no matter how sincerely they believe it, no matter how nice they are. Now, we've got some university math professors in our audience this evening, friends. And when a math professor is marking papers, they don't look at an equation and say, okay, now Robbie here wrote 2 + 2 = 5 on his test. And now Robbie's such a nice guy. He's so generous and kind. And he gives a lot of money to charity. And I've spoken with Robbie about this time and time again. And I know that he sincerely believes 2 + 2 = 5. His entire family believes 2 + 2 is 5. It's been what he's been taught from birth. In fact, the entire country that Robbie comes from has believed 2 + 2 = 5 for centuries. Therefore, because of all this, Robbie's answer is correct. Does that make sense to you? Would you want that professor as your teacher? Actually, yeah, I probably would. I would have done a lot better in math, I'll tell you that much. Not so good in life, but a lot better in math. Does that sound rational to you? Folks, Robbie is a wonderful man, but Robbie is wrong. Now, you may be sitting there right now and you're shouting at me in your mind. You're thinking to yourself, Darin, you are stuck in an old way of thinking. People have their own truths. Truth is relative. Truth is subjective. Truth depends upon how you feel and what you think. There is no such thing as objective truth, Darin. Whenever someone says that to me, and I have heard it many times, I heard it last year from microphones at Skeptic, my first response is always, well, is that true? Is it true that there's no such thing as truth? Because if it is true, it's false. Because you're saying it's true that there's no such thing as truth, which is self-defeating and irrational. There is such a thing as truth. It is literally impossible to deny it. Okay, so what is truth? Here's the definition for truth that I use, and we're going to use this evening. I think it's the simplest and easiest to remember. And that is this. Truth is whatever, see, this is why I have to wait for the water to dry. Whatever agrees with reality. I was going to say whatever agrees with Darin, but I won't do that. Truth is whatever agrees with reality. That's the definition we're going to go with this evening. Truth is whatever aligns and agrees with reality. Truth doesn't care about feelings. Truth isn't affected by what I think about it. Now, here's the thing. For the next few moments, we're going to hold the 3 major worldviews of the world up against the light of reality. Our goal is to see which worldview best aligns, best agrees with reality as we presently know it. Our goal is to see which worldview appears to be the most plausible. And we're going to do that in the next 30, 40 minutes. And we're going to let you then decide at the end how effective we were in which of those 3 you think is most plausible. Now, there are all kinds of religions, there are all kinds of worldviews, there are all kinds of philosophies, there are all kinds of theories out there, but when you scratch beneath the surface, they can all be traced to one of the following 3 general sources. And I've given these to you on your outline, I believe. Secular, Eastern, and biblical. Right? So there's secular worldview, what we'll call, again, we're just using large baskets here to make it simpler tonight. Eastern worldview and what we'll call a biblical worldview. Okay? By secular, that represents atheism, materialism, naturalism, secular humanism. By Eastern, here I'm talking about Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Sikhism, Oprah. By biblical, that represents Judaism and Christianity, and for the sake of simplicity, I will include Islam within this 3rd group, though in the end, we're going to make some strong distinctions even within this group, okay? So let's do a quick comparative survey tonight. Your challenge is to decide which of these 3 worldviews is the most plausible in your mind. Now remember, we're not talking about 100% certainty. We're talking about which is more plausible. In the end, 51 over 49% is enough to have a justified true belief, to have a plausible, rational ground. What is the most plausible of all of these? Okay, let's start off with the secular. As your outline says, here's some foundational truths from the secular worldview. They believe, first of all, there is no God. There is no God. This view claims that the material realm is the only realm that exists. There are no souls, there are no spirits. Everything is rooted in and ruled by the physical, natural realm. That's why it's called naturalism. You think you have a free will, but you don't. Everything is determined by the chemicals and connectors within you. In the words of Richard Dawkins, the author of The God Delusion, you are dancing to your DNA. Everything is actually predetermined. You think you have a free will, but you don't. The secular worldview simply asserts without evidence that the natural realm is all that there is, and it's the only realm that we know. There's no God. Okay, another observation about the secular view is this. According to this view, you create your own meaning. You create your own meaning in life. You have to create your own meaning in life, according to this view, because according to this worldview, you live and you die, and nothing ultimately lasts, so nothing ultimately matters. Meaning this, we're all familiar with the game of Monopoly, right? Or the game of Risk, where you try to dominate the world in Risk and dominate the economy in Monopoly, okay? At the end of your game of Risk, at the end of the game of your Monopoly, it all goes back in the box, right? I mean, it's not reality, it's a game. And it all goes back in the box, back on the shelf, and you're done. Do you care about the outcome of the last game of Monopoly that you played, or the last game of Risk that you played? Do you want the results of that game mentioned at your funeral, or engraved upon your tombstone? Here lies Bobby. He won at Monopoly. I doubt it, because ultimately, it was just a game. Ultimately, in the big picture of life in the universe, it was meaningless. According to the secular worldview, life is identical to the game of Monopoly or the game of Risk. It is ultimately meaningless, because none of this is going to last. Our universe is going to collapse or expand, heat death or cold death, whichever, and none of it will ever matter. Because none of us and none of this will exist. I have a copy of Maclean's magazine that I've kept in my files because I read an article in it. It was, in fact, the cover, about a very successful Canadian businessman and his wife who were found murdered in their home back in Toronto. And describing the businessman, the author of the article wrote this: Sherman, a self-described atheist, wrote in his autobiography, and I quote this man, this atheist who was murdered, "I have always felt a disdain, a hatred for organized religion. Life has no meaning or purpose." Now, that businessman wasn't being a pessimist. He was simply facing head-on the byproduct of his atheism. If there's no God, if there's no afterlife, we're just a bag of chemicals. We're a moist robot. And life in itself has no ultimate meaning and no ultimate purpose. Now, you can create your own meaning. You can create your own purpose and say, well, it has meaning to me because I love this and I love that. Fine, good, but that's a little world that you created, a little bubble you created. In the end, ultimately, it doesn't matter. Is that your experience of reality? That there's no ultimate purpose, there's no ultimate meaning, there's no ultimate morality in life? It's just things we make up? How does the secular atheistic worldview explain some other realities of life as we know them? Well, as your outline says, the secular worldview struggles to explain a contingent universe. A contingent universe. Contingent meaning something that had a beginning, that had a source. Everything seems to be telling us that our universe had a beginning. We learned this the first week, roughly 14 billion years ago. 13.8, I think, is the official number. So what is the secular explanation for this reality? They don't have one. Unless you consider everything came from nothing to be an explanation. Secondly, the secular worldview struggles to explain a finely tuned universe, Now, we know that there's a series of cosmological constants and quantities that were embedded into the initial conditions of the Big Bang. Initial conditions that were set to an infinitesimally minuscule degree. Numbers beyond human comprehension that we looked at the first week. And any of these unimaginably huge numbers, if any of them were changed by the infinitesimally tiny degree, our universe would not exist. So what's the secular atheistic explanation for this incredible and undeniable fine-tuning? Pure luck. Random chance. The secular worldview struggles to explain, thirdly, the existence of objective moral values and duties. The existence of objective moral values and duties. There are things that are wrong for all people, of all cultures, at all times, no matter what their laws permit. Things like torturing babies for fun. We intuitively know this, just like we know 2 + 2 is 4. The secular worldview struggles to provide an ultimate and objective grounding for morality, for this reality. According to the secular worldview, morality is purely subjective. It's either a byproduct of biology, a product of biology equivalent to a burp, or it's the product of a social contract that we make. It's a social construct. It's something we invented, something we could change if we wanted to. If we wanted to, we could say, starting tomorrow, torturing babies for fun is a noble act and will be rewarded with a Medal of Honor. We could do that if we wanted. Next, number 4, the secular worldview struggles to explain the facts surrounding the life and resurrection of Jesus. Remember, we learned there are historical facts surrounding Jesus, facts that are essentially settled and require an explanation. And we saw a couple of weeks ago, 2,000 years worth of skepticism has yet to provide a naturalistic explanation for all the known facts. Folks, truth is whatever agrees with reality, or whatever aligns with reality. According to the secular worldview, there is no God, only the physical realm exists. Life has no ultimate meaning, so you must create your own meaning. There's no explanation for the beginning of the universe. There's no explanation for the fine-tuning of the universe apart from it being the result of random chance. There's no explanation for the historical facts surrounding the life and resurrection of Jesus. In your mind, does the secular worldview agree with reality? That's what you have to decide. In your mind, does the secular worldview align with reality? In your mind, is the secular view the most plausible option? Now, only you can make that decision for yourself. You have to be convinced in your own mind to some level of certainty. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's look at the second major grouping of worldviews, what we're calling the Eastern view. So that would include Buddhism, Chinese folk religions, Hinduism, Jainism, Shintoism, Sikhism, Taoism, Baha'i. Maybe Baha'i, that could be thrown into here as another stream. It's sort of all over the map, to be honest. The secular worldview claims there's no God, but the Eastern view makes a radically different claim. As your outline says, according to the Eastern worldview, you are God. You are God, according to this view. Many people don't realize this, but in the vast majority of Eastern religions, God is not a personal being with a mind, emotions, and a will. According to this worldview, the Eastern worldview, God is an impersonal force. God is the energy that permeates the universe, like the current that's flowing through the wall sockets in your home. For the Eastern thinker, the purpose of life is to become one with this universal energy. And you do this by breaking through the illusion that you actually exist. Which is the second point on your outline. According to the Eastern way of thinking, you don't exist. You think you exist, but you don't actually exist as an individual. You and I and everyone and everything are actually one and the same. For the Eastern thinker, everything is one and everything is God. Not too long ago, I found myself sitting on another plane with a couple who believed this very thing. We were squeezed in the back of a plane on yet another long flight. This one was heading to Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh. And the couple beside me was heading to India. I was heading to Dhaka, and they were heading to India to spend a few months with their guru. They were from Seattle. And her answer to everything that we were discussing was, look within, Darin. Look within. The answer to everything is within you. I said, well, what if I look within and all I see is darkness? She said, look deeper. Look deeper. You need to realize the truth, Darin. You are God. Now, like another gentleman who had a similar conversation, my first thought was, well, if I was God, I'd be in first class, first of all. Tell you that right now. But after a few hours, literally, I mean, we're going across the world here. After a few hours of discussing her worldview, I asked her if she could do me a favor. I said, do you have direct access to your guru? Can you ask your guru a question for me? And she said, yes, we have direct access. That's why we're going to get answers to our questions in life. I said, okay, here's my email address. I gave her my card. I said, can you ask your guru this question and then tell me his answer? She said, okay. I said, here it is. I wrote down the question. I said, ask your guru this. Guru, if I don't exist, then why did I travel all the way to India to give you a few months of my time and a few thousand of my dollars to understand the reason for my existence? If I don't exist, why am I trying to find the reason for my existence? Maybe she lost my email address, but it's been 8 years and I still haven't had a response from her. I hope she made it safely to India. Is that your experience of reality? That you don't exist? That everything is ultimately one? That there's ultimately no difference between good and evil, love and hate? I mean, that's the whole purpose of the yin-yang symbol, you realize. It's the oneness. It's the good and evil look different, but they're actually all one. That's what that means, folks. Is that your experience? Well, how does the Eastern worldview explain some other realities of life as we know them? Well, as your outline says, the Eastern worldview struggles to explain a contingent universe. You're going to see a theme here. A contingent universe. According to the Eastern worldview, existence is eternal. The universe did not have a beginning, according to this worldview. It goes through endless cycles of birth and destruction, birth and destruction. Now, as we've noted already a couple weeks ago, that's not what modern science has discovered. The Eastern worldview, secondly, struggles to explain a finely tuned universe. If there's no ultimate cosmic designer, how can they explain this incredible, unfathomable design? The Eastern worldview has to resort to the same response as the secular worldview. They can't explain it. It just happened. Thirdly, the Eastern worldview struggles to explain the existence of objective moral values and duties. See, according to Eastern thought, good and evil, right and wrong, are actually illusions. The truly enlightened ones realize that there is nothing different about these two concepts. To quote a passage from Hindu scripture, I quote, "Good and evil of this world of duality are unreal, are spoken of by words, and exist only in the mind." Dr. Francis Schaeffer once wrote about an encounter he experienced with some students in a dorm at Cambridge University in England. They were sitting around having tea and discussing various worldviews, and a young Hindu gentleman started to explain the Eastern view of reality. And this is what he said. "There is but one reality," he said, "which includes all things, all ideas. Any differences are merely illusions. All is in reality one. There's ultimately no difference between good and evil, cruelty and non-cruelty." At that, one of the students at Cambridge grabbed a kettle filled with boiling water and held it over the head of the young Hindu student. he said, okay, so if your worldview is true, if there's no ultimate difference between cruelty and non-cruelty, then ultimately, whether or not I choose to pour this boiling water over your head doesn't matter. The young Hindu student rose from his chair and he left the room without comment. He could not match what he believed about reality with his experience of reality. Finally, number 4, Eastern thought struggles to explain the facts surrounding the life and resurrection of Jesus. Now, when it comes to the life of Jesus, Eastern thinkers fall into a bit of a bind. Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhs, you name it, they all speak very highly of Jesus. And I appreciate them for that. They all claim him a holy man or a guru or an enlightened one. I mean, they all find it necessary to adapt to Jesus and include him into their worldview. Hindus are even willing to add Jesus to their long list of demigods. The problem with this reverential tone is this: Jesus didn't leave them with that option. Jesus did not teach that all religions are basically the same. Jesus did not teach that all paths lead to God. Jesus taught the exact opposite. Jesus taught that there are many paths that lead to destruction, and there's only one path that leads to eternal life. That's quoting Jesus. Jesus claimed that a person's eternal destiny, whether heaven or hell, depended upon their response to his life and his claims. I mean, this is a serious problem for Eastern religions, because holy men and gurus and enlightened ones don't go running around making such outlandish claims about themselves. And if Jesus' claims are false, holy enlightened gurus don't go around telling such destructive lies. This has been formulated by a famous formulation that Jesus is either a liar, a lunatic, or the Lord. What he said was false, and he knew it was false, he's a liar. If what he said about himself was false, but he didn't know, he's a lunatic. If what he said was true, then he is the Lord. He's God in flesh. Oxford University professor C.S. Lewis once summarized this dilemma well. I quote him. C.S. Lewis said, "I'm trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about Jesus. They'll say, I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God." Lewis says, "This is the one thing we must not say. A man who is merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on the level with the man who says he's a poached egg, or he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice," he said. "Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to." Not only do Eastern religions struggle to explain the life of Jesus Christ, but they completely stumble over the resurrection of Jesus Christ. You see, Jesus didn't just make claims. Anybody could make claims. For thousands of years, religious people have made claims. I can make claims. But Jesus backed up his claims by being raised from the dead. There is no place in Eastern thought for a physical resurrection. According to the Eastern worldview, the physical world is something to be denied and resisted and abandoned eventually. For the Eastern thinker, eternal existence is not about you living forever in a resurrected body. For the Eastern worldview, eternal existence is you ceasing to believe the illusion that you exist, and you becoming lost in the energy that is God. So Eastern religions either completely ignore or deny the historical facts surrounding the resurrection of Jesus. Truth is whatever agrees with reality. Truth is whatever aligns with reality. According to the Eastern worldview, you are God, but you don't actually exist. You just think you do. According to the Eastern worldview, and in direct opposition to the observations of modern science, the universe is eternal. The fine-tuning of the universe is an accident. There's no difference between good and evil, right and wrong, cruelty and non-cruelty, and the historical facts surrounding Jesus' life and resurrection are ignored or denied. In your mind, does the Eastern worldview agree with reality? Does it align with reality? In your mind, is the Eastern worldview the most plausible, more plausible at least than the alternatives? Only you can make that decision for yourself. You've got to be convinced in your own mind to some level of certainty. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's look at the final major worldview. The secular atheistic option says there is no God. The Eastern option says you are God, which brings us to the next blank on your outline. The biblical option says there is a creator God. There is a creator God. The biblical option recognizes the existence of a personal God, meaning a God with thoughts, emotions, and will. A God that communicates, a God that desires a relationship, not just some impersonal energy force. The biblical option recognizes that this personal God created the world. That means this world belongs to him. It's God's world. God designed it, God created it, God owns it. God's the one in charge of it. As your outline says, the world is under God's authority, according to this worldview. The world is under God's authority. And that includes moral authority. My wife and I raised 4 kids, and every one of the kids at some point in their life said, "You're not the boss of me." Or they wouldn't say it to us, but they say it to each other. "You're not the boss of me." Well, according to the biblical worldview, God is the boss of you. God designed this world. He created this world. He's the only one who has the right to define this world, meaning defining what is and what is not acceptable. Well, how does the biblical worldview respond to the 4 key issues we've looked at? Well, the biblical worldview provides a plausible explanation for the existence of the universe. For the existence of the universe, the contingent universe. It was created at the beginning of time by an eternal being that exists outside of space and time. Secondly, the biblical worldview provides a plausible explanation for the fine-tuning of the universe. This eternal being that exists outside of space and time designed the universe to produce and sustain intelligent life. Thirdly, the biblical worldview provides a plausible explanation for the existence of objective morals, values, and duties. Hope I'm not going too fast for you. God himself is the grounding for all morality. God is good by his very nature. His nature is goodness. And whatever does not measure up to the standard of his nature is therefore evil. God doesn't measure up to a standard. He is the standard. He is good. And anything that doesn't measure up to his nature is therefore evil. The biblical worldview provides a plausible explanation for the facts surrounding the life and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, here is where the 3 biblical worldviews get narrowed down to only one. When it comes to Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, only one of these 3 provides an explanation that addresses all of the known historical facts surrounding the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And that one is Christianity. Judaism and Islam both acknowledge that Jesus lived. That's not denied. Both Judaism and Islam deny that Jesus bodily rose from the dead. However, neither provide explanations that address all of the facts of history surrounding the resurrection. Only Christianity meets that criteria. When you get right down to it, folks, the resurrection of Jesus is the litmus test. The resurrection of Jesus was the defining moment in human history. We are followers of Jesus for one reason. I am a follower of Jesus for one reason, because of the resurrection of Jesus. It was the resurrection of Jesus that validated his life, that validated his authority. Jesus didn't just talk the talk. Anybody could walk around making all sorts of claims. And for thousands of years, religious leaders and gurus and pastors and priests and rabbis and imams and reverends have made all sorts of claims about themselves. Anybody can talk the talk, but Jesus walked the walk. He said, "You can kill me and I'll rise from the dead." They didn't grasp it at the time what he was saying. But he lived what he said he would do. His life and claims were validated by him rising from the dead. So we follow him. That is why, as his followers, we believe what he believed. We teach what he taught. We live like he lived, and we love like he loved. And when it comes to the Bible, Jesus believed, taught, and lived that the Bible is God's revelation to us. So as his followers, we believe the same. Why? Because he rose from the dead. And so I believe somebody who can rise from the dead. They have more authority than anyone else. What sets Christianity apart is it is rooted in human history. It's not merely a collection of lofty ideas and fanciful legends. Christianity is rooted in space and time. It's rooted in historical events, real people who lived real lives. It's rooted in real people that you can read about in historical works, like the works of the Roman historian Josephus, where you read about Jesus, about John the Baptist, about Pontius Pilate. You even read about Jesus' brother James in this Roman history, written by a Jewish man. Christianity is rooted in real places like Jerusalem, Capernaum, Sea of Galilee. I'm taking 40 people from Broadway into Israel, into these places in about 3-4 weeks, where once again we will walk the land, we'll visit these sites. It's archaeological sites. It's in the land. It's there. It's undeniable. These aren't fairy legends. These are real places, historical events. Real places you can visit and see historical archaeological artifacts traced to the very people and the very events you read about in the Bible. Christianity is not comparable to legends like Zeus or Thor or Apollo or Santa Claus or Bigfoot or the Tooth Fairy or the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Christianity is the historical testimony that Jesus lived, died, and was raised from the dead. And this historical reality must be dealt with by any religion or any worldview to claim to be a true reflection of reality. Let me conclude. We began this evening by pointing out that there is such a thing as objective truth. Truth is whatever agrees with reality. We've seen how the secular and the Eastern worldviews fared. What about the Christian worldview? According to the biblical Christian worldview, there is a creator God and this world is under his authority. And I would put to you that the creator God provides a plausible and rational explanation for the beginning of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe, the existence of objective moral values and duties, and the historical facts surrounding the life and resurrection of Jesus. Now that's just my opinion. That's just me. But what about you? Do you agree or do you disagree? That's for you to discuss around your table for the next few minutes. I turn you over to your table leaders. Discuss this.
All right, welcome back. And a big thank you to Darin for leading us through this content tonight. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but in case you missed it, Darin can't be with us live and in person tonight, regrettably. But if you've been texting in your questions to me about tonight's topic, please know that they are being lovingly looked at. I haven't forgotten about you, but I'm not going to ask Darin these specific questions tonight, but I'll glean the best questions from tonight that you've texted me in, and I will ask him live next week your questions about this week, okay? Those burning questions that you have. So what we're going to transition to right now is a pre-recorded question and answer time that I did with Darin that were questions that came live off the floor from one of our Skeptic nights. And so we took the best questions live off the floor and I interviewed Darin and asked him these things. So We're going to move right to question and answer about maybe some pushback. Hey, Darin, I didn't understand that. Or what about this? Or have you considered that? And so we're going to move right to Darin about answering questions about what about other religions. Here we go.
Hello and welcome back. As you know by now, each week after the session, we sit Darin down and we simply ask him some of the most hard-hitting questions that come out of the topic. So, Darin, as we talk about other religions, what do you have to say to the people that are saying, this is all well and good, Darin, but what about all the people in the world that have never even heard about Jesus? What does God do with those people?
God is not going to judge people for rejecting information that they were never given in the first place. So that would be cruel. So people who've never heard of Jesus are not going to be rejected based on their lack of knowledge about Jesus. The Bible teaches in the book of Romans 2 key litmus tests. There's the test of our response to creation around us. Scripture says that we've been given enough information with the world around us to learn of God's eternal nature and power. So there's the testimony or the witness of nature, but there's also the testimony of our own conscience. Deep down we know that there is a good and an evil. That our understanding of good and evil may change over time, and different cultures may have different nuances regarding that. But the bottom line is we all have this imprint on our own hearts and minds, a conscience of knowing that we have not lived up to the expectations of what we know we should do. So if a person puts those two together and they recognize, okay, there has to be a creator, a God out there somewhere. If they're open to this and if they're looking up to this God, I believe that God will do everything possible to ensure that that person is presented with the message of Jesus Christ and given an opportunity to accept this forgiveness that Christ offers. And I think in Scripture there's some good examples of God doing that very thing, bringing to people the testimony of Jesus, knowing that they would accept it if they heard it.
And speaking of other religions, so there are some sincere religious people all around the globe. What about their religious experiences? Like, what makes your religious experience any better than theirs?
When you get right down to it, it is our experiences, isn't it? It's my experience of God that I'm basing everything upon. My faith is not based on arguments for Christianity. It's based foundationally on my experience with God, and then those arguments simply support what I've already experienced. So the question is, so Darin, what makes your experience better than anyone else's? Truth is, yeah, they could have very valid or very real experiences themselves. But then what you have to do is look at the evidence to support your experience or that contradicts your experience. Meaning, every person has every right to rely upon their personal experience unless they have a defeater of that experience, unless they have evidence that suggests that, oh, what I'm experiencing may not actually be valid or true. And so why I think that my experience or the experience of a Christ follower is better than, say, other religions' experiences is that we have evidence that supports our experience and contradicts the experiences of others. I could simply say, let's say for someone who's a follower of Islam, what makes my experience better than theirs? Well, the reality is that the Quran teaches things about Jesus that we know historically are not true. We know that Jesus did actually die on the cross, where the Quran implies that he didn't actually die. So there, you could have whatever experience you want, but we have a defeater that your experience actually is not necessarily true. And I think we did our best to touch on this in the presentation that we've just watched, in the sense that here's what your worldview presents, but does your worldview actually line up with reality? So your experience is important, yes, unless you have a defeater for your experience, and then you have to start to then question your actual experience.
Isn't sincerity the litmus test in all this? Like, what does it matter what a person believes as long as they believe it sincerely?
Sincerity is important. You should sincerely believe in what you're claiming to believe. But sincerity isn't the foundational ultimate litmus test. What if you sincerely believe that eating the liver of a newborn child is how you gain eternal life? Suddenly, you can sincerely believe that, but that's just kind of twisted. Or if you sincerely believe that everyone else deserves to die except you, you're the only one who should deserve to live. You could sincerely believe that, but that doesn't validate your belief system. So sincerely holding to something, nowhere else do we hold that true. We don't apply that to math. I sincerely believe 2 and 2 is 5. Well, you can sincerely believe that, but that doesn't measure up to reality. So sincerity is not held as the ultimate standard in any other area of truth in our lives.
This is good stuff. Thank you, Darin. And we're looking forward to next week's talk.
All right. So this brings us to the exciting conclusion for tonight. Thank you for sticking with us and walking through these worldviews, secular, Eastern, and the biblical worldview. Wherever it is that you are in your journey, wherever you land in one of those worldviews, I want to just encourage you to keep exploring, to keep asking the tough questions, keep wrestling with those areas of doubt, and join us next week as we move to week 5 in our Skeptic course. We're going to be answering the question about science. Hey, doesn't science disprove the Bible anyway? Like, hasn't science ruled already? And don't we all just agree that science is right and the Bible is archaic and wrong? So we're going to be answering the question, talking about, doesn't science disprove the Bible? So if you're into science and you are a scientist and you love the scientific method, join us next week. We're going to talk all about it. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you guys next week. Darin will be with us live. See you then.